Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's award-winning author and, of course, best-selling author too, no other than Mr. Joe Clifford.
How you doing, Daniel? Thanks for having me.
Welcome again to Book 101, Mr. Joe. And as usual, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Joe Clifford. I'm the author of somewhere around 20 books, a couple of them nonfiction. Most of them are crime, noir, domestic suspense, thriller, mystery, that genre. I've been doing this for the last 20 years, and I have a new book coming out in February called The Moth, the Flame, which I believe we'll be talking about today.
Let's do the recap of All Who Wonder.
All Who Wander was the story of Brooke Mulcahy, a woman who disappears in the night somewhere around, I believe, 1998. And, or it might be 1991. I can't remember. I have so many timelines in my books. I believe she disappears in 1998. And we have her brother, her stepbrother, half brother, Robert Kirby, different, same mom, different dad. And he gets a visit from a young lady claiming to be Brooke's daughter. And that's the impetus for that novel, as Robert, as he is now known, formerly Bobby, has to navigate a somewhat tumultuous past and some secrets he prefers stay hidden.
Interesting, people. If you miss our episode, please do listen to it. And of course, say my name.
Say My Name is a difficult one to classify. That's part memoir, part true crime, part fiction, parts, I don't know what you'd call Say My Name. It was a fun novel to write. It's an extension of the J. Porter thriller series, which I wrote for Ocean View back in 2010s. And it takes it in a new direction, looking at what, how a novel is constructed. It gets into sort of more of a meta approach to craft and storytelling. It's a fictionalized version of me, although you'll see why it's called Say My Name if you read it. That one did pretty well in the charts, and we have a sequel of sorts called I Won't Say a Word that'll be coming out sometime soon, depending on which publisher I go with.
Oh, looking forward to it. And Mr. Joe, let's talk about your latest book coming this February. A Moth to Flame. Can you give our listeners a brief overview of your book?
Now, Moth the Flame is the story of two sisters, Jess Barrett and Lydia Barrett. Jess is murdered at a protest rally for a popular teacher who has just been let go by the school. And we go fast forward 25 years, and her sister Lydia is now a medical examiner, coroner's investigator for the greater Los Angeles area. And she encounters a woman who has died the same way her sister did, which is sets in motion the narrative arc of that story. I moved away from the cold mountains of the Northeast to the warm environs of the California, Southern California. But that's what the story dictated and what it demanded it, as a setting. But yeah, it is a stark contrast to what I've been writing lately. But that's just where the muse or the mind or whatever you think governs this creative process takes you, and that's where it took me.
You have a lot of books. Are you considering them to have an audiobook?
They're all audiobooks. They're all my books have been into audiobooks, or just about all of them have been made into audiobooks. I've had the fortune of having a couple of great narrators, Timothy McKean and Jennifer Jill Araya, and she'll be doing the version of All Who Wander, which will be coming out. I believe that comes out actually next month from Tantor Media. So yeah, I have all my books. Most of my books are in audio form, and you can
That
find them at killers everywhere.
that be awesome. A moth to flame. How did you come up with the title of your book, and what does it signify?
Well, the title refers to not a podcast, a YouTube channel that is hosted by a man named Shane Ellett, who back in the 90s thought he was making fun of a movie called Public Volume. I don't know if you remember that Christian Slater movie, but this
Yes.
takes place down in Southern California. And if you live in California, you know everything is sort of a wink and a nod, and sarcasm rules. And Shane thought he was sort of taking a riff on a movie by making fun of it, when he really was as sucked up by pop culture as anybody else is and was and will be. And that's where we get the title from, because he goes by, his persona on his YouTube channel is the Moth, the Light in the Darkness, and he talks about the death of his classmate Jess Barrett, suggesting that it wasn't a disappearance, but in fact a murder. And this catches the attention of Lydia Barrett, who is Jess's sister, and together they form an unlikely partnership, Shane and Lydia.
Interesting, Mr. Joe. So, could you describe the main characters or themes in your book that readers can look forward to?
I'm always fascinated by siblings, and that probably goes back to my relationship with my brother. This time it's sisters, but sisters, brothers, it doesn't really make much of a difference, especially when one of you is left behind and the other one moves on to the great unknown. The themes of the book, that would cover the themes of the books. The character Lydia is much more pragmatic, very. I based the character on my former thesis advisor, Lynn Barrett, who is a professor down at Florida International University. And Lynn is the smartest person I've ever met, but she's very guided by a very strict set of rules. She doesn't deviate beyond the parameter of this rigidity, of learning and knowledge and understanding, and I find her approach to life to be mesmerizing as well as invigorating. And I used a lot of those characteristics for Lydia. She's inquisitive. She's undeterred. She follows her gut, but she also definitely never lets it override her logical faculties. So yeah, Lydia was an interesting character to write. One of the more fun characters that I had to write, but also knowing that it was based on somebody who I admire so much in Lynn, it gave me an extra thrill.
Very well said, Mr. Joe. Did you draw from any personal experiences when you're crafting the story of or characters?
Well, I mean, the characters we talked about, but in terms of a plot, you're always drawing on your past, and all of my books seem to, in one way or the other, touch on drug addiction. I spent some years battling various substances, and most of my books, whether I want them to, is irrelevant. They seem to have an element of drug addiction or characters who are at least on the peripheral, coping with elements of addiction. So that's certainly in there. The plot itself, generally I rip something from the headlines. So woman or person who went missing, and I change the names. I think a lot of crime writers will do that. I can't recall if I've written so many of these things. I can't recall if there was a specific story or newspaper article, or if this one was just kind of original. I seem to recall this one being just a story I made up, and I could be proven wrong later on. All Who Wander I used Maura Murray is a very loose inspiration. She's a woman who disappeared a long time ago, and my condolences to the family. But yeah, I use that story to craft All Who Wander. I believe A Moth to Flame was just my own imagination of I came up with the story, and I know I was thinking of Pump Up the Volume a lot. That soundtrack was awesome, and it kind of went from there. And yeah, it's I didn't see the end coming any more than you will. I hope it was a surprise to me as much as I hope it is to you guys. So yeah, it was a fun one to write, and like most of my books, it was a creepy one to write. I don't write.
Yes, Joe. So before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening in Argentina. Muchas gracias todas Argentina for supporting this podcast because in Buenos Aires, FD, I got 45% audience share, Tucumán at 32%, Buenos Aires, the capital, at 18%, and Mendoza at 5%. Thank you so much, Argentina. Muchas gracias. And I hope you always support this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Joe Clifford. So, Mr. Joe, what do you hope readers will take away from A Moth to Flame?
You write about darkness, and you write about strife, and these elements of life that are maybe less than pleasant, but I don't think you do that with an aim to depress anybody or bring somebody down or to show hopelessness. I believe it's the exact opposite. I think you paint pictures of dire and morose, or maybe these hardships that people face, showing that the opposite is also possible. I mean, if the opposite wasn't possible, what's the point of illustrating all the things that can go wrong? So, and that's sort of the tagline of the book. Only through the darkness you can see the light. And this is not anything original. It's darkest before the storm, the light at the end of the tunnel. These are all, tropes and stereotypes and maxims that we use all the time. But I think they become that way because they're true. There is something to be said about, it's your darkest hour, holding on and finding a way to make it to the next day, and it being a little better and a little brighter. And that's certainly the theme of this book and just about everything I write, really. Not giving up and not surrendering and not quitting, because eventually, if you persevere, something better will come along. And I believe that. I do believe that. If for as dark as these days can get, I think there's always the possibility of a brighter horizon, somewhere in your future.
Definitely, Mr. Joe. So, were there any particular authors or books that influence your writing style or the content of A Moth to Flame?
I mean, it's all female writers, all women writers. It's Wendy Walker, it's Mary Kubica, Jennifer Hillier, Shannon Kirk, Emily Carpenter, Jennifer McCauley. I mean, I all I do is read female authors. I didn't for a long time. I don't know why. I tended to read mostly, tough guy, fiction, your Ross McDonald's and your Raymond Chandlers and your Dashiell Hammetts, mostly old school stuff, which way colored my writing and sort of dated the early stuff I was doing is pastiche. But now I read mostly just modern crime writers who happen to be women, and I think that's because they tend to do domestic suspense better than men. They have an insight, an emotional insight that allows them to achieve a gravitas that's I find appealing. And now that I'm moving away from, I guess, stories of the street, because it's been a long time since I lived on the street, and I live on a nice little suburban block with a charming cul-de-sac. I'm focusing more on suburban thrillers and suburban tales. So that's probably why the paradigm has shifted at least personally, and in both my writing and what I read. And as you know, those two things are inextricably connected. Um, what you read is what you write. And so, yeah, I mostly read female writers, Gillian Flynn, Paula Hawkins, and I just think they're just doing a better brand of thriller these days.
So, Mr. Joe, how important was research in creating the world or context of your book, if
Well,
applicable?
this one has a wildfire in it, so you got to be careful when you're when you're researching this stuff. You got to make sure you have all your details correct. You got to make sure if you're talking about a wildfire, there's actually a wildfire that took place on these dates. There is a scene that takes place at the Santa Monica Pier, and fortunately, I was able to catch a potential mistake before this went to press when I realized the Santa Monica Pier was actually out of commission for the year I was having a scene there. It was in the 80s, the series of storms sort of washed away the pier. And so for about 10 years, the Santa Monica Pier, as we know now, with the Ferris wheel and all the arcades, wasn't there. So, I had to go back and do a rewrite. And I'm glad I caught it, because if you don't catch it, trust me, a reader will catch it and they will write you a rotten review based on the fact that you got it wrong. So quite a bit of research goes into this. I don't know how people wrote books before the internet, because now I need to know where the Santa Monica Pier was in 1991. I can just type it into a computer and I have my answer within seconds. I can't imagine somebody doing this back in 1952 and having to figure out, if there was a park in 1934 that was open. Um, so yeah, it's the internet is both a blessing and a curse, because boy, you can get your information really quickly. You can also get distracted very easily. But quite a bit of research goes into it, because you've got to, if you're talking about timelines, you got to make sure you get them right. And if you're going to have a natural disaster, that natural disaster has to have happened. You can't just make up a wildfire and hope it corresponds with the dates of your book, because that stuff makes people mad. It's like getting guns wrong. You just don't ever get a gun wrong. That's why I don't write about guns. I have friends authors who write guns, and if you get the wrong type of gun, man, you can get about 150 letters and a few bad 1-star reviews.
Definitely, Mr. Joe. So, can you tell us about any symbolism or hidden layers in your book that readers might not immediately notice?
Well, I mean, it's hard to ignore a wildfire that's encroaching as the book reaches its climax. I mean, that's a little, one could say heavy-handed. So if you're not picking up on that one, I don't know what to tell you. It's pretty, as the scenes get, as Lydia gets into more heat, the fire gets closer. That's kind of hitting somebody over the head with the profoundly obvious, but it worked nicely. I felt it worked in organically, and it was a nice device to use to propel the action and keep those two things moving forward. And it just so happens, that the California, where I live, has a wildfire season, which is, as Mark Marone jokes, like, how can fire be a season? Well, we have one. We have a fire season, and fortunately, it's just about over, which is great. We didn't have any, brownouts or, power outages or whatever PG&E does to justify the fact that they don't fix their infrastructure, because they're a greedy corporate conglomerate who hoards all the money for the CEOs. But that season's over, and now we're moving into just the dreariness of a long, cold, lonely winter.
So, Mr. Joe, how do you think your book stand out in its genre or category? A Moth to Flame.
I've hit the coveted, and I say it sarcastically, cult classic status, which is a nice way of saying about 8 people like what you do, and they really like what you do. I've sort of missed the window on hitting the big commercial markets. I mean, it's doubtful I'm going to ever be a Dennis Lehane or even someone smaller than Dennis Lehane. I mean, I have a nice loyal fan base. I have a good readership, and I write for them, and I hope that they appreciate the time and effort I put in, because I appreciate the time and effort they put into reading it, and I don't want to ever disappoint them. And I hope I don't, because they don't ever disappoint me.
Definitely. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Love Letters, people. Love Letters are collection of love stories of people get lost, get crazy, and disoriented. In the name of love, we will learn from these stories and let me in their shoes to feel what it's like to be in love. So please do listen. Love Letters Plus. My books are out from Volume 1, Love Letters Volume 1 History, available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. So, Mr. Joe, what kind of readers do you believe will connect most with your book and why?
And one of the nice parts about having gone to Florida International University to earn my master's degree was they steered me toward genre, and very few masters in fine arts programs will do that. They want you to stick to writing literary fiction, which is somehow deemed more respectable. But the cool part about writing genre is you have a built-in fan base. There are people who read mysteries and only mysteries, and that's what they read. The real trick, as any author will tell you, is getting your book in front of somebody's eyes. People can't read a book they don't know about, which I think is a tagline from MJ Rose, who is a book promoter. Um, so I have the mystery readers, and I have the mystery readers who are my fans. Getting the book in front of a lot of eyes is always tricky. You have to have quite a few things work out. It's a matter of timing. It's luck. You got to have good. I have a great publicist, but it's really a little bit of lightning in a bottle. So many books come out, and you have so many authors, and there's so many great authors writing so many great books. You have to hope that for whatever reason something about yours registers, but not only that, that it catches the right eye at the right time, so that word of mouth, tidal wave can happen. And that's sort of out of my control. I can write a great book, or the best book to my ability. I can hand it off to my editor. I can hand it off to a publisher. I can hand it off to my publicist, and from there it's a matter of whether the gods are shining and casting favor on you that day. And the gods these days seem to be rather fickle with who they're shining that light on. So I, I'm hoping for, like every book you're hoping for. You're hoping for the book to be a New York Times bestseller. I've written 20 of these things, and that hasn't happened yet. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with understanding that you have control over one aspect of the craft, and that's the craft. That's the writing. I do the best job I can writing a book. I spend endless hours, agonizing over each line by line by line, trying to get the rhythm and the musicality and the feel of the book right, trying to get the authenticity of the characters and the motivation, and closing up those plot holes and making sure the timelines, and making sure there's no closures of piers when there's big climactic scenes happening on them. But the rest of it, you sort of have to just say, okay, we'll see, and learn how to be okay with selling what you sell, and being what you are, and doing the best job you can, and letting the chips fall where they may. I mean, I can only control what I can control. And early on, I used to get very upset that I couldn't reach a wider audience, but that's not my call. That's something beyond my pay grade. I'm just the writer. I just write the books, and we'll let the public decide, or the heavens, or the fates, or furies.
Well, Mr. Joe, you're in a good track. And are there any plans or sequel, or you're late for the Moth to Flame?
I always write books with the hope that somebody is going to be like, hey, we love these characters and we would like to see a series. And I certainly set it up for there to be a partnership with Lydia and Shane going forward. That said, if Moth the Flame doesn't sell, amazingly well, and it doesn't catch the eye of a big publisher, chances are this is the last you'll see of them. Just because writing a sequel to a book that didn't wasn't a knockout doesn't really happen. I've also written a series, to a book that did fairly well, and there's pitfalls to that also. Writing's a strange profession. It's in a lot of ways it's a dying art. If you look at the numbers of people who read, they've been dwindling pretty severely. I mean, we're going on to different mediums with TV and TV shows, even films are sort of movies and theaters are have seen, I think, their heyday. Now we're going into more of the streaming service, and Facebook is kind of lost, and now there's TikTok. Everything changes. The world's always moving. So I don't know if there'll be a demand for more Moth the Flame. I certainly can conjure up more stories. I am filled with stories. I have nothing but stories. They keep me awake at night. But whether somebody wants to pay me for that is a different matter altogether.
Definitely. So, can you share any interesting anecdotes or behind the scene stories related to a moth flame?
I can tell you that I found one of my favorite songs ever by posting this title online, and somebody being like, "Hey, you got to check out Rex Chapman's song "A Moth the Flame," which I found. It's this little known rock gem, and if you get a chance to listen to it, it's certainly the soundtrack to the book, and he's a very interesting musician with a unique voice and a distinct style, and I'm glad, if nothing else, I was able to find that song, because in addition to being a writer, I'm also a musician, and I'm always on the lookout for good new music, especially good new music that's old music and reminds me of Bruce Springsteen, which this certainly did.
That will be your officially song while you're writing a moth flame.
Yeah, I always have a soundtrack. Every book comes with a soundtrack, 40 to 60 songs that I play. And so they have to be songs I really, really love, because I read and write and rewrite a book. You're going probably in the hundreds, a couple hundred times you're revisiting the same book, rereading the same book. So you better write the book you want to read, because as the joke goes, you're going to be reading it about 85 more times.
That's interesting, Mr. Joe. And thank you, FitchBot, for being the number 2 best book podcast on the planet and being number 1 in the book art category. Thank you so much. And of course, listen notes for my latest score of 26 and belong to 10% popular show globally. So, Mr. Joe, how do you see your book fitting into the broader literary landscape or cultural conversations?
Well, I mean, living in California, we have, the wildfire. Just to be, just to talk about the elephant in the room. I mean, wildfires are getting worse, and whether you believe global hoax global warming is a hoax, or you're correct and you recognize that it's an actual phenomenon, uh, you know, that is a very timely, persistent factor of anybody who lives in this state, and we're a pretty big state. So uh, the wildfire, I think, will certainly register, but on a more personal level, character drives fiction, and it's the relationships between the characters, and what I'm hoping to do here is also show uh, the remnants of a family after a divorce. Jess and Lydia's parents are divorced, and being a dad and being married, having been a child of divorce, these are things that are on my mind constantly, especially how two people can fall in love and commit to a lifetime partnership, and then it goes so horribly wrong that they end up hating each other, and that's an element throughout the book that I play with. So I'm hoping people will pick up on that, and maybe garner some sense of realizing they're not so alone.
Very well said, Mr. Joe. Yes, people in California and British Columbia, I think they probably changed already the summer season to wildfire season. because
Yes.
because every summer these two places always burning wildfire, people. It's the evidence that climate change is there. So let's do combat climate change, people. And most of the people that I talk with, we are not too late to combat climate change. Let's unite and let's do resolution solution, people, not war. Let's unite and let's talk about climate change because it's about time.
I couldn't agree more, Daniel.
Let's have peace on earth, not war, but let's talk about climate change. So, Mr. Joe, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Well, you can find all my work at joeclifford.com. I am not a difficult find, in the words of the great Bruce Springsteen. I'm easily found. Just type my name in a search engine, and you can find me. I'm pushing around 20 books. I got more books on the way, and I'm going to keep writing them as long as people keep reading them. It's what I do. It's my full-time job, and I couldn't be more fortunate or blessed or grateful.
And can you invite our listeners to pre order?
Yes, it's available right now for pre-order on Amazon, and in the next couple of weeks, it will be available for pre-order at fine retailers everywhere. A Moth to Flame comes out February 1st, 2024.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Joe Clifford because if you support him, more books to come. Thank you so much for your time again, Mr. Joe.
Okay, you take care.
Maricon people, see you soon.